I want to talk just for a second as I'm introducing Dr. Annette about the partnership between the University of Minnesota and the Blandin Foundation. Dr. Annette is the Executive Director, President and CEO of the Blandin Foundation, and I hold her in great esteem. The work that the Blandin Foundation has done is really foundational for the state of Minnesota and provides a great amount of leadership development, leadership training for Minnesota's communities, and particularly amongst our First Nations communities. As a lifelong resident of Minnesota, Kathy has built her entire career, her focus on building the people, building the communities, and building the legacy of both the Blandin Foundation and the people of Minnesota. And as a physician, she takes this code of ethics, this code that she took, and applies it very, very well in her role as head of the Blandin Foundation, and diagnosing and enabling Minnesota's communities to heal themselves. She has multiple careers, this being second one. And as such, she came to the Blandin Foundation with tremendous experience, both from the administrative side, but also from her leadership skills. And the University of Minnesota Extension and the Blandin Foundation and the Bush Foundation, between the three organizations, we figured we had trained 900 community leaders in leadership development. And so in an early conversation that I had with Dr. Annette and Wade Fouth, who was here at the conference, we determined that this partnership needed to continue. And so as a result, we brought up the idea of having this conference and really coming together as co-sponsors of this conference. And I am beyond grateful to Dr. Annette and also to the staff of Blandin that made this possible. So it is my pleasure today to not only introduce Dr. Annette as the head of Blandin Foundation, but also as my dear friend.
Good morning. Welcome to Minnesota. What a wonderful day driving over here. I thought, what a way to start this day today with you. I was sitting and thinking I should not start this day without telling you a story, and then I thought, no, I better not. My husband he'll go, don't tell that story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I got married for the first time about 10 years ago, and hopefully it's the last time. But after my husband and I, when we were going together, we fished a lot, and we live in Minnesota. We both love Minnesota, all these lakes. And one of the things we did is every summer, we tried to fish at least 30 new lakes. That was our initial goal and intention. And we did it for about 3 years, and then it became 20, and now about 5, 6 after all these years. But I was married for 6 months, and Timothy, my husband, was sitting, and I was doing dishes and cooking, and he puts his coffee cup up in the air, right? And the coffee pot's behind him. And I say, Timothy, the coffee pot's behind you. Just reach over and you can pour your own coffee. And he goes, it wasn't like this 6 months ago. And I said, Timothy, I was trolling then, you're in the live well now. Change happens. Before I go too far, I'd like to know who's with us. And I had the opportunity to meet one wonderful lady today that was from India. And I thought, how many of you in the room are not from North America? Could you raise your hand? Okay. How many are from Minnesota? Could you raise your hand? And we've got a number of people that are from others, probably North America, other places, but wonderful. This is great for all of us to be together. I'd also like to know, and how many of you work with rural communities? Wow. Excellent. What a mix of differences we have here today, yet we share passion for the health and resilience of places, right, of communities. That's where our heart lies. Speaking of place, you may not realize, I'm sure you do now, after last night, Brent explained to me, that we are very close to a special place. And I had to make sure I got this right, because often I'm standing at the podium and I'm pointing someplace and I'm pointing in the opposite direction. But the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge, just across the street is this corridor of land and water, and it stretches nearly 70 miles along the Minnesota River. Not only does the refuge provide valuable habitat for a diversity of waterfowl and other migratory birds, fish, and wildlife, it's 14,000 acres of connective tissue. Think about this: human to animal, industrial to natural, and urban to rural. And considering that some of the species may migrate here for thousands of miles, this is a place connected to many countries and many continents too. So fitting then that we are here today, because change follows relationships. Progress is possible because we are connected. It is sadly obvious when we are not in relationships, when people are not connected. I struggle to get through reading the news every day. We're facing challenges, aren't we? One thing I know, though, is that we can do together what seems impossible to do alone. I see every day how people come together for the sake of their communities. How do communities gain the capacity to do the heavy work of creating ambitious, vibrant rural communities? And when they do, how can it be sustained? This year, my organization, the Blandin Foundation, has celebrated 75 years of standing with Minnesota's rural communities to design and claim ambitious futures. How many communities? We've worked with 209 places on broadband, provided grants in 5,400 communities, and there are Blandin-trained community leaders in 2,100 communities. My hope is that some of the insights gleaned from the past quarter of a century will be helpful to you as you are building local capacity to sustain development. First, a bit more background. Blandin Foundation is one of only a handful of private foundations in the United States focused exclusively in rural places. By rural, we define rural as 35,000 people or less. I realize that the concept of philanthropy means different things around the world, but we do three main things. First, we provide grants of money, primarily to other nonprofits. For example, we provided a grant, as stated, to help support this conference, where the work that we all do is hand in glove of community development, strong, vibrant communities. Each year, we also award about $12 million in grants to rural communities in Minnesota, only in Minnesota. Blandin Foundation also works with rural communities on issues that have significant impact on their futures. Right now, one of those big issues we have been working on is access to and use of high-speed internet, or broadband. In the state of Minnesota, there's so many times when I'm visiting small communities and driving along or go to a small community, and there's no access. You go to plug in your computer or to get your emails off your cell phones, and guess what? There's no lines. How can this be? Well, that's something we live with, and rural communities must be connected. In Winona, Minnesota, which is just a few hours from here, Project Fine has been teaching people new to this country how to use the internet in their native languages so that they can communicate with family, apply for jobs, take classes, and so on. Winona and its leaders, such as those in Project Fine, have participated in our Blandin Community Broadband program that helps the communities to decide, helps them decide what technology infrastructure it needs for its future, connects leaders as they explore options, and supports them with matching grants as they learn and explore technology. The third thing that the Blandin Foundation does is to train rural people in community leadership. There is no question the best investment we ever made in sustained positive change is training diverse and committed community leaders. More than 7,000 community leaders have spent up to 8 long days in leadership training with the Blandin Foundation over the past 30 years. We have had the honor of spending more than 500,000 hours with these local leaders. Are there leadership program alums here today? Are there any? Yes, fantastic, fantastic. That's the Blandin Foundation. For those of you not from this state, a few points of reference about where you are. In Minnesota, our population is split about equally between the metro region, which includes the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and everywhere else, which we call Greater Minnesota. We have large parts of the state that are full of small towns, cities, and townships. Those are the light gray areas on the map. Some of our rural counties, like St. Louis County, have really low density overall, but it's skewed by the presence of one single larger city, which is Duluth. Our racial and ethnic picture looks like this. We are a dominantly white culture. In both urban and rural places, we also are seeing growth and diversity that has come with new people, often immigrants, filling gaps in the workplace. If I were to describe Minnesota in a few words, I would say we're nearly half of the Minnesota's population. We fill in the landscape with hard-working, diverse, and passionate people, and we require a lot of community leaders. I also want you to know that rural Minnesota is a place of assets. Beautiful lakes and rivers, rich forests, minerals and earth, inspiring children, thriving indigenous peoples, and yes, challenges. For example, much of the state's poverty is in rural areas, especially in northern Minnesota, where we are based. The darker areas are the highest number of people below the poverty levels. You should also know that the community development landscape in Minnesota is quite rich. There are many regional development organizations, plus local, regional, state, federal, and academic partners are engaged. Some of us foundations are engaged too. We are working together to both better align and to build and sustain our capacity. A shout out to those who lead this work to bring together around community development in Minnesota. As if you don't have enough to do to focus on your own region, you have seen the possibilities of working together. That's leadership. Yes, each community, each region is different, and yet we have common interest in resiliency. Collaboration is one way we sustain each other. Together, we can better communicate that community development matters. And together, we can help to explain that the work has changed. Today's development looks different. In the new economy, barriers of distances are disappearing. Community vibrancy is more complex. It demands that we look beyond the mainstream. In Minnesota, we also have identified the opportunity to learn together. Together, we have created the Minnesota Network of Community Developers. Blandin Foundation is honored to facilitate this work. because we see how innovation and change is happening at the local level. If you want to be hopeful, look at the local people designing and claiming their futures. This is where change and hope is, at community. You know, I heard a funny story. I thought it was cute. A rocket scientist was asked if his work was hard, and he said, "You think this is hard work? Try community work." Community, after all, is not a thing. It is a living system, or more accurately, a web of interconnected systems, like the refuge across the street. Every community is different. A community is shaped by its geography, its histories, its culture, its resources, and yet we see some common themes. Here are my top 5 lessons that we've learned. Lesson number 1, the healthier the community, the more its residents are able to solve problems and create new trajectories. In Blandin Foundation's experience, community health can be understood and assessed through 9 lenses or dimensions. While they are distinct, these dimensions are clearly interrelated. And I'd like to go through each of these just a little bit. Lifelong learning. In a healthy community, all ages have access to educational opportunities. People are engaged, they're informed, they're fired up. Inclusion. People consistently and intentionally see and seek differences, believing that their community is stronger for them. I need to tell you about Grand Rapids and the Circle of Healing. The Circle is a wide range of individuals who have been meeting to understand and now to reconcile differences between white and Native American cultures and histories. The police chief, the Chamber of Commerce president, a judge, and a whole bunch of diverse people meeting to hear from each other, to dig deep into issues like historical trauma, and to imagine a different future for the region and its peoples. It's a terrific example of intentional inclusion. Inclusion, some of the hardest work that is needed, and that we do, and that must be done. Recreational and artistic opportunity that meets the needs of all and express the cultural backgrounds, talents, and experience of all community members. Environmental stewardship. Environmental sustainability is very present for rural places, where we have many of the country's solutions like wind power and forests. Rural places also are particularly vulnerable to forces like climate change. Infrastructure and services, whether it's transportation, broadband, water, sanitary living conditions, everyone has access. There are places still in our country that is this wonderful country we have, where sanitary living conditions continue to be a challenge. And safety and security, measures that protect everybody, informed by differences such as culture and mental health. In our recent Rural Pulse study of statewide perceptions, we definitely have seen heightened concerns. We've been doing the Rural Pulse study for we've had every 3 years, and we've got about 7 done right now. And what it does is it shows us trends or feelings, perceptions over time. And this last one we just finished, we find that people feel it's tough to focus on anything else when you just don't feel safe. Community leadership, and I'll say a little bit more of this later. Economic opportunity. I have listening sessions throughout the state because I think as leaders, sometimes when you grant to others, it would be easy to lose touch with those that you really want to impact. So one of the things I'm committed to is to get out and meet with different communities and ask them, what's happening in your community? What's your strengths? What are some of the challenges that you're dealing with? The first thing that I hear, that I've heard from every community that I've met with in Minnesota, is economy, jobs, And these people tell me that their focus on youth is also their concern about their youth. Those are the two top things when you talk to communities one-on-one that you hear about. Spirituality and wellness. A healthy community recognizes that a person does best when they are sound in body, healthy in mind, and grounded in values that direct their lives. This goes for you too, community developers. Again, it is the balance of all these separate but interrelated dimensions that lead to a healthy community. And a healthy community is much more able to create and sustain positive change. Lesson number 2. The second lesson I'd like to share with you is that change can happen from anywhere, especially today. A leader does not need the power of position to make things happen in a community. Anyone can frame issues, build social capital, and mobilize resources. In fact, one of the hallmarks of healthy communities is that engagement and power are widely distributed with multiple stakeholders. The Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe, northeast of here, took this challenge head on. The band's information technology team stepped up as leaders in an unprecedented way. They saw economic opportunity in their community's ability to leverage technology, Wi-Fi access, lots of training, strategic planning for infrastructure. But in that process, the youth participated in the band's app camp and created websites and apps that bring culture to life, both for their own generation and others. I have to make a real comment here because these are kids that are teaching me our language, our Ojibwe language. They're coming up with ceremonies by talking to the elders and putting them online so we know that they're there and where to go and we can learn some of this. It's amazing. Technology and cultural leadership now is coming from these youth. These youth are teaching us. It's like, wow. Again, change can come from anywhere. Change at Fond du Lac is happening from everywhere. Our lesson number 3. Closely related to that is lesson number 3. Leadership is an unlimited resource. Interestingly, leadership is even more needed in rural communities than in larger cities. A University of Minnesota Extension Center for Community Vitality, Ben Winchester, has been measuring rural leadership. Ben will remind you that on a per capita basis, rural communities need more leaders to get things done. A big thank you to Ben and Extension for your thought leadership on brain gain and rural communities. So how is rural doing in attracting and developing community leadership? The hard truth is not all communities put their people assets to work. Our Rural Pulse survey found that 26% of respondents had never been invited to play a leadership role, and only 41% of rural residents say they had recently served in a community development leadership role. I know that as community developers, you have a vested interest in a community's ability to get things done. So a question for you. Where do you have the opportunity to reach out and invite someone into a role of leadership? Someone who just needs to hear, you are the leader we've been waiting for. I grew up on the Red Lake Indian Reservation, and as a girl, you learn and you get your name. And so many of the girls were given these wonderful names: Beautiful Star, Rising Sun, The Dawn. I was given the name Anakubade, to tie together. And you go, what? When you're a little kid, you're waiting for something else. It took me quite a while, but from the day I was named, I guess, I was invited to be a leader, to tie together. What it means is like in a fence where it's going this way, and you have to tie them together to make this work. And that was the name I was given. So not just any kind of leader, but one who ties together. I mean, what an honor, but boy, what a challenge too. And as someone whose name means to tie together, I especially love our leadership lesson number 4. Sustainable community action is anchored in its quality and diversity of connections. Sustainable community action. That's what we're talking about here today, right? By investing in a broader set of relationships for you, your organizations, and your communities, you help them and all of us develop community action, progress. We must stick together, get things done. The Rural Pulse Survey tells us that we have work to do as we develop our leaders. 43%, nearly half of people that responded in rural Minnesota do not feel that local leadership reflects representation from people of differing backgrounds. Finally, lesson number 5. In order for a community to change, it has to have hope. Hope is believing that a different future is possible for ourselves, our people, our communities. Hope is being able to imagine what that future might be. Wise leaders know that creating a shared vision for the future, a vision arising from and embraced by the community, is the engine that powers real change. When people have hope, they can accomplish amazing things and better overcome the difficult things. Sometimes hope emerges from unlikely places, from tragedy. About 10 years ago, a 16-year-old student at the Red Lake High School reservation in northern Minnesota went on a shooting rampage that left 10 people dead and 7 injured. He killed his own grandfather, a teacher, a school security guard, and 5 other students. Another dozen people were injured. Because of my role at the Indian Health Service, I was assigned to coordinate the federal response with the tribe. At the time, I was the most senior federal official geographically close, plus I happened to be Native American, and on top of that, was raised on that reservation. I graduated from Red Lake High School. That was my high school. I knew the teacher who was killed. I knew the shooter's family and the students' families. And being a physician and having worked for years with this tribal leadership, I trusted them and they trusted me. There was so much to organize, and my most immediate role was just to get home to be there. I remembered being really sad, and I remembered so many funerals. But I saw leadership from so many in the community. One that I particularly remember is I remember a nurse coming up to me after about 3-4 days after the shooting, and we were all tired. And the nurses, that very night, we have a small hospital in Red Lake. 12-bed hospital, very small. And they took and they made a makeshift morgue for all of these folks, plus treating all the folks come in. You can just imagine that community that night and the thinking and thought and where are we going, what is going to happen. But this nurse came up to me and she said, all my nurses have been on now for 3-4 shifts. They're finding sleep where they can. Help us. She formulated what the problem was. She came to me and I was able to reach out to other communities that sent in help and others. And these nurses got the relief that they needed. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but leadership can come from anywhere. And that's what I saw. Leadership can come from anywhere, but also so can hope. Because even in those days of this terrible tragedy were the seeds of hope, the absolute commitment to protect the children, the urgency to get that school back together, and to create a promising future. Communities established youth leadership councils, and we strengthened the Boys and Girls Club. We took on drug and alcohol issues, youth leadership, and we even started talking more about cancer prevention. All elements of our community there came together. We had the fire people were there, firemen and women. I say fire people. The fire people were there, tribal leadership, educators, the healthcare systems, and a lot of ordinary citizens that were tremendous leaders during this time. Also, many partners stood with us as we went through this, and the Blandin Foundation was one of them. I never forgot that. We used what we'd learned about leadership during this time of this dark, dark time to help the community heal and emerge stronger than before, resilient and hopeful. You are out in your communities working to make them even better places to live and work every day. So you already know this, but I think it bears repeating. Nothing truly worthwhile is ever easy. There's a lot of hard work ahead. I hope that these stories and the 5 lessons will be of value to you in your own journey. It takes a healthy community to move forward. Change can happen from anywhere. Leadership is an unlimited resource. We must learn to tap that even better. Quality and diverse connections sustain progress, and hope leads to change. When people arrive at our leadership training retreats, we tell them, you are the leaders we've been waiting for. I went through, and I remember how I felt when that was said to me. You are the leader we've been waiting for. What a wonderful and awesome sense of challenge that is. You are the leaders we've been waiting for. Invest in community leadership. Great community leaders frame issues, build social capital, and mobilize resources. They know that they have to do it themselves, but they can't do it alone. Know that complex community issues still come down to local leadership, and that it's possible to move a community and change a system. A great example is broadband, very complex. Assess your connections. Encourage those you serve to do the same, because change breaks along relationship lines. How healthy are your relationships? How diverse are they? With whom are you connected? To whom aren't you connected? Try this. Map an issue you really care about. Put it in the center, then ask yourself, who are we connected with on this issue? Even better, ask, who is not yet connected to this issue? Reach out and bring differences into your midst. To be honest, you may need to ask others to help you see beyond your own reality. I know that Blandin Foundation did. Right now, we have one of the most diverse board of trustees I'm aware of. Racially, politically, age, lifestyle, economic status, we have been very intentional, and it makes us stronger, and it's a journey, and it's not always easy. Finally, every once in a while, it's hard for many of us that are in this work, but you have to just stand still for your own sake as well as the community's. Know that what you need is there, that good change is possible, and take care of yourself. Your work can be lonely, it can be exhausting and frustrating, and it can change the future. Over and over, I see that real communities are built through hard work, the hard work of leadership, of genuine inclusion, of reaching across boundaries and building those lasting connections. That's the fertile soil from which resilient, vibrant rural communities grow, and you are a big part of this. I believe that we're all in the hope business. Thank you.